what's up Taiwan? I'm Jaime Ocon with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan held events all around the country on Wednesday for the 228 Peace Memorial Day. Tiffany Wong was in Jaime County with more.
Hundreds of people gathered here in front of the Jaime County Government Office earlier today to commemorate the 77th anniversary of what's known as the 228 incident here in Taiwan. It's an occasion to remember the thousands of anti-government protesters and innocent bystanders killed 77 years ago at the hands of Chinese nationalist military police in a period of violent clashes that began on February 28th. The anniversary is now also a time to remember those who suffered under the subsequent period of martial law known as White Terror. In her final 228 Peace Memorial Day address in office, President Tsai Ing-wen said she hoped that the darkest parts of Taiwan's history would not be forgotten.
这段艰困的过去是台湾历史的伤痕，要治愈伤痕，必须了解受伤的原因。当我们能够诚实地面对真相，互相倾听，才能够缝合伤口，进行真正的和解，让过去的历史不再是台湾分裂的原因，而台湾人民也会因此更能共同守护民主，一起往前走。
Every year, all around the country, there are events just like this one to help people remember the atrocities of the not-too-distant past and try to prevent a repeat in the future. Justin Wu and Tiffany Wong in Jaime County for TaiwanPlus.
The period of political oppression that started with the 228 incident in 1947 remains central to many Taiwanese people's identities. But many people from families that arrived as refugees during the Chinese Civil War feel their suffering has been forgotten. Bryn Thomas has more.
Every year, on February 28th, Taiwan remembers its past. The date marks the start of an uprising against Chinese nationalist rule in 1947. On that day, police brutality sparked mob violence against recent arrivals from mainland China. Years later, memories of the violence and the political repression that followed have become key to Taiwan's national identity. Today, the incident is commonly framed from the perspective of the local Taiwanese and not the Chinese who suffered.
当时被杀害的外省人，绝大部分都是旅客、游客跟商人。那么，所以目前看到的资料都不详细，而且都不准确。那么，从1000多个到2000多个、3000多个都有死伤。 因为28发生以后，后来这个民国38年，这个大陆撤退，两岸就不来往，而且后来的28赔偿条例里面，只包括所谓被政府杀害的这些所谓受难者，不包括被暴徒杀害的受难者。
These victims were among the hundreds of thousands of Chinese people that moved to Taiwan as refugees or as part of the Republic of China's government during the Chinese Civil War. Their influx and its effects on the economy and existing power structures in Taiwan led to tensions, then mob violence, and then years of political repression. Liao Qiping is the grandson of an activist who was killed in the violence. He comes from a local family that was compensated as part of reparations in the 1990s. Now, he's on a mission to make sure the government recognizes all the victims.
你要还真正整个228真相的原貌，这包含当时有外省人受害，所以如果我们这个政府民间大家一起努力，现在这个生活在这个我们台湾生活在中华民国的所有的国民，不管他是外省人、台湾人，那才会真正的大家能够放下心结，共同寻求台湾更美好的未来。
Today, estimates on the number killed vary between 18,000 and 28,000, but many feel these murky figures only tell part of the story. The exact number of Chinese who died or were victimized is unknown, and the topic is highly politicized.
我觉得主要是因为说，228这个议题，因为它太敏感了，所以它政治力量，各种各样的政治力量，其实很早就介入了，过早的介入。那又因为说到了很后来，我们的这个官方资料才慢慢解密嘛。
In the years since the 228 incident, Taiwan has grown into a modern democracy, one that prides itself on facing up to its authoritarian past. But how that history is remembered, and by who, continues to define its political divide. Scott Huang, Sam Hui, and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
To learn more about how 228 is remembered differently among Taiwan's different ethnic groups, Ed Moon spoke to James Lin, a historian at the University of Washington.
The 228 incident is obviously a massive event in Taiwanese history and in the formation of a Taiwanese identity. Among the victims that day were Chinese who had come over, mainlanders, as they're often referred to. Could you tell us a little bit about the violence and the impact that had on the mainlander community?
The violence was generally directed against people who were thought to be associated with the Kuomintang government that had arrived in 1945, essentially folks that arrived after the Japanese had left, had really taken advantage of Taiwan's economic situation to rule in a kind of corrupt, inept manner. And that, combined with post-war inflation, led to a lot of resentment from the native Taiwanese population. And so in that immediate kind of post-February 28th violence against the government, there was a lot of chaos. And according to recent historical scholarship, it seems about 1,000 of these mainlanders, Waishenren, were killed in the weeks after February 28th.
Do you think the fact that historical memory has really focused on the government crackdown and forgotten about the events maybe in the weeks preceding it, do you think that has kind of helped to fuel a kind of almost divide among the different ethnicities in Taiwan in terms of how they remember 228?
Historical memory is definitely one of the most important parts of 228 today, because the February 20th incident, is over 70 years ago, and the implications for it have to do with Taiwan's democratization, the issue of transitional justice, and kind of righting the wrongs that occurred under the 70 years of Kuomintang rule. So in some ways, it symbolizes kind of the entire rule of the Kuomintang on Taiwan. In some ways, it has grown to become maybe even more, as you're saying, maybe even more than what the initial February 20th incident was about, which is actually kind of complicated, and it involved a lot of kind of movements and counter movements.
So do you think that kind of these different historical interpretations based on ethnicity and identity may gradually all come together to form a consensus, or is it something that is possible to be passed down from generation to generation?
These expressions of identity, especially ones who hold it to a stronger degree, tend to be in older generations today, people who grew up under the historical authoritarian period and whose childhood exposure would have been more focused on a lot of the ethnic grievances. I think that these identities are being slowly replaced by what we're seeing in contemporary Taiwan, which is more of a civic, pluralistic kind of national identity as opposed to an ethnic national identity.
That was reporter Ed Moon speaking with historian James Lin. A research plane flown by NASA returned to Taiwan on Wednesday as part of an ongoing study on local air quality. The flight is part of a NASA program that works together with several Asian countries on air quality research. The goal is to understand the causes of pollution in Taiwan's south. The flight was NASA's second over the country this month. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we leave you today firing on all cylinders with this footage of James Bond's vehicles at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. I'm Jaime Ocon. Take care and see you next time.